Hi, I'm Ylli with a special competitive studies project. So what we wanted to do today was something a little bit different. We just witnessed a major get-together in Beijing by some of the world's most important leaders. And so I wanted to sit down with some of my closest colleagues, people that have worked in government or that have tracked these issues really carefully, and just do a quick analysis of what we just observed in Beijing, what are the implications for the geopolitical order, and what were some of the key takeaways. So with me today is Samir Lalwani, who helps us on all issues related to U.S.-India defense relationship. Samir, welcome.
Thanks.
Good to have you finally with SCSP.
I'm happy to be here.
David Lin, my close colleague for many years, who has worked in United States government and has tracked issues related to China, East Asia, and technology. David, good to have you here.
Thanks, Ylli.
And of course, my close friend, Joe Wang. We worked together at the White House, covered Russia, long time hand of European American issues. So Joe, welcome back.
Always good to be here.
So David, let's start with what was the purpose of the gathering? What did Xi Jinping want to get out of this?
Sure. So focusing on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, I mean, it comes in between, it's a big week for Xi, right? He gets to play the global host to dozens of the world's greatest leaders, or some of the greatest leaders in the world. And the SCO meeting, the SCO meeting, comes after the first time Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi have met together in public, and then comes right before Xi throws this big World War II anniversary parade in Beijing, where there was hundreds of thousands of people in attendance, thousands of troops, tanks, aircraft on display. And so I think it's a huge propaganda win for Beijing, I think is the bottom line. And it gives Xi an opportunity to promote itself as being this global convener, and at the same time push some of the tech-focused agenda items that it's been pushing the past couple of weeks that we can talk about more later.
Joe, for Vladimir Putin, this was a big win. Having been recognized in this fashion, welcomed by the community. What do you think in his mind? What did he get out of this?
I mean, look, I think, agree with everything that David said about what Xi was doing in Beijing with SCO and with the parade, right? I mean, a great, the pomp and circumstance is always one of the things that the media pays attention to. I mean, the other thing I think for Putin is, look at the past couple of weeks, right? He came to Alaska. When was the last time he came to the U.S., right? I can't remember off the top of my head. I mean, it's been that long in terms of probably, I think the last time, might have been during the Bush years. I mean, I don't think he came during the Obama years because he was the prime minister at the time. And so, anyways, and so you look at the past couple of weeks of Putin, right? Just all of him on the global stage, front page newspapers all around the world. So he's got to be riding a high right now. And in many ways, I don't think, the Russians, Putin didn't necessarily get anything out of this visit himself. There were a few deals that they cut with the Chinese that were probably in train for some period of time. But if you look at nothing has been resolved in Ukraine, but getting to be seen with Xi, getting to be seen with Modi, getting to be seen with, Kim Jong-un, who cares about Kim? I mean, he's just another instigator on the global stage. But being seen with President Trump, being seen with President Xi, being seen with Modi, it's like Russia's back, right? And so in many ways, for him, it's a great PR coup. But then how this translates into real success, either on the battlefield in Ukraine or for his economy, are still to be seen.
Yeah. Samir, I think for a lot of U.S.-India relationship watchers, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Beijing and attending this meeting came as a big surprise, as a shock. I know, you and I belong to the same community of believing in this U.S.-India relationship, so there's a lot of, disappointment, a lot of, trying to assess what's going on. How did we get here? From your point of view, how do you read, Prime Minister's visit to Beijing?
So honestly, I think this was inevitable in some ways. I think India has been rebalancing even last year. Last year, Prime Minister Modi met with Vladimir Putin, and that was during a NATO summit, and they had some really bad optics at the timing of it. There was a thaw underway with China. So at some level, India has always professed itself to be a multi-aligned country. It also sees itself as a bridge builder, right, between North and South, between East and West. And so that part of its identity was never gone. But then there's this added element, which, the elephant in the room is, the United States has been pushing India around a little bit, or a lot, in terms of tariffs, additional tariffs because of Russian oil. And so I think India and Prime Minister Modi also probably saw an advantage in demonstrating that they had some options. Now, the depth of those options, how substantive were the outcomes of the bilateral with China or the SCO meeting, is open for debate, and frankly, I don't think there's a whole lot there. And I think the number one reason is because Pakistan was there. Right? That sort of tells us all we need to know about how serious this grouping is. But I do think India is looking for alternatives, for options, for economic, engagements, even with China. But it should be lost on us that before India went to this, they stopped in Japan first, and they did a pretty significant deal there. So I do think India's not turning around entirely, but I do think it's adjusting.
Right. And David, I mean, when you read the statements out of Beijing, out of SCO, you see that there's clearly sort of like an ambition to do a geopolitical alignment more towards Beijing, away from the United States, away from, dollar as a currency, away from our digital technology ecosystem. Most of the time, these statements go unfulfilled. It's just a desired, wishful list of, how I see the world and how I would like the world to act according to me. How do you think this time around, this statement is, more serious, less serious? Is it in the same list of other statements? Or do you think, Beijing will put really meat behind this bone and really drive forward their ambition?
I think the meeting certainly has diplomatic value. Again, and going back to the propaganda value of this, showing Xi, at the center, introducing these world leaders to each other, having them shake hands with one another. But I think it is important to remember that a lot of this is perhaps only skin deep. What was it? Just a couple years ago that Chinese and Indian troops were beating each other with sticks at the actual line of control at the border between India and China. And when it comes to Russia, U.S. Sino-Russian relations too, China was put in a very tight spot when Ukraine invaded Ukraine, when Russia invaded Ukraine and forced China to, essentially support Russia diplomatically. And so there's still a lot of underlying frictions between China, Russia, China, India. But I think for this particular occasion, it was, again, that moment to show some, perhaps even alternative to the U.S.-led world order, and show that China was in the middle of it all.
Right. Joe, the relationship between Russia and China has been debated a lot. There's a camp that believes that after the statement on limitless friendship, this friendship is really sort of like an alliance, more or less. But at the same time, Russia, reckless action in Ukraine, an invasion of Ukraine, has caused some in Beijing probably to pause and view Moscow as a junior reckless partner. How do you think this going forward will shape the the Russia-China relationship?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's, I think the most important thing here, going off of something that David talked about in terms of like looking at how the SCO has evolved over the years, right? I remember, I was in grad school when it first came up as a thing, and I think we all kind of like jokingly just laughed it off as like, no one's going to take this organization seriously. Like, what does it actually do? And then fast forward 15, 20 years and see where it is now, right? I mean, we're having a podcast, talking about it because of how important the optics and some of the messaging out of the event was. So things don't just happen overnight, right? I think that's always one of the key things to keep in mind when it comes to like these big geopolitical strategic shifts. I think like there's clearly the bromance between Putin and Xi, that's there, right? I think, no one can dispute that. Whether it's like percolating through the rest of the system, that's there's still a level of distrust, like Samir and Dave have talked about, between any of the two countries individually, right? There's still a level of distrust that I think we need to be mindful about. And so in many ways, the trap for us is like, how do we not fall into the trap of just reading the statement and assuming that everything is there in a way that, they are the same sort of alliance that the U.S. has with Japan, that the U.S. has with NATO. We're real alliances where like the integration of our forces, the spending, the capabilities, the operational coordination is there in a way that we don't quite see yet, between Russia and China, between and obviously definitely not between the Indians and the other partners there. And so, there's a lot that we need to unpack. There's a lot we need to pay attention to. I always love your line about the fact that, like, we don't have the luxury. If you're in the U.S. government, you don't have the luxury of not taking a lot of these statements at face value, right? We need to plan ahead to make sure that,
Right.
When Russia and China are saying they have this limitless friendship and partnership, like, what do we do to make sure we're postured to respond to whatever the two countries can do against us, right? That's what it means to work on national security. But for the rest of us, as we're trying to make sure that the array of options that the United States has to respond to, like, the array of things that the Russians, the Chinese, North Koreans, Iranians can do, like, we're being thoughtful about, like, what are the array of options that we can put on the table to make sure that, all the things that you talked about in terms of how the dollar is still the global currency that really runs the world, right? Mm-hmm. And in terms of just the different trade flows and all those things are still there for us to be the preeminent power in the world.
Right. Before I ask you all what the United States should do, Samir, let me ask you one more question about, of all these, big leaders that attended Beijing, Modi is the only one that actually comes from a democratic country.
Yep.
And so leaving that aside, the U.S.-India defense relationship, I think, serve as a strong fabric in how this, relationship has evolved over time. I mean, you track this issue. Will this be impacted at all? Do you think going forward that strong bond that exists between the U.S. and India on the defense side? Do you think Modi being absent from the military parade sends a signal that I can be part of SCO, I can shake hands with you guys, but I don't want to be part of the spectacle that Xi Jinping organized?
Yeah, so I think that's right, that there is nuance even in Modi's actions and presence. And I do think the defense relationship runs a lot deeper. It actually fits very closely with the tectonic alignments that we're seeing taking place in the 21st century. India has a border with China that's still disputed, and China continues to coerce India. Certainly had a skirmish with them 5 years ago, but also in May of this year, China armed, trained, and wired the weapons that Pakistan used to fight India. And Indian officials came out and said this explicitly, that China was an active party in that 87-hour war. So I don't think that's forgotten for India. And I think that sort of puts a limit on sort of the depth of its relationship with the SCO, and simultaneously sort of is a draw for its relationship with the United States. I mean, right at present, even during the SCO, India is doing a major exercise in Alaska with the Indian Army and the U.S. Army, UWS. And there's sort of multiple components to it. I think India is sort of on the verge of buying a lot more U.S. defense equipment. If you look at India's maritime reconnaissance, it's platforms that it operates to track all things in the Indian Ocean, including Chinese submarines. They're all American platforms. So I think that underneath sort of this tip of the iceberg, there's a lot more stability there. It can't endure indefinitely. Obviously, the political leadership sort of takes these countries in different directions if they choose to. But I think we can endure some tensions because the ballast of the relationship is quite strong.
Right. David, last question. What should the U.S. do? What should be our position vis-a-vis this gathering? Should we change anything? Should we continue?
I think one of the lowest hanging fruit things the U.S. should do is show that there is an alternative to this, right? Be it through alliances or even what is the American alternative. One of the things we didn't get to talk to in depth was just how, at the SCO in particular, China was trying to push a lot of its techno political agenda, right? Like some of the announcements coming out of the SCO were that Beijing wanted to, push Beidou, its global navigation satellite system, across the SCO and across into Russia, who has a competing GNSS system, but trying to push its technology products across some of these countries. I think one of the first ways the U.S. can respond is show, again, that there is an alternative to the China tech stack. That is a big priority for the administration today. Another thing the U.S. should do and can do is, again, emphasize the role that our allies and partners play in all of this. As Joe pointed out, our alliances, our treaty partners, the relationship we have with them runs so much deeper than what China has with Russia, with what China has with India, or with any of the SCO partners. I think those are almost just at the surface level at best. Our alliance structure is so much deeper than that.
Joe?
I think it's in many ways, like I think after the Cold War, one of the things that America stopped doing well was like play the game of global diplomacy, play the game of international politics, right? I think we evolved into this like very black and white world because it was the end of history. Like we won the Cold War and we just assumed that whatever we wanted was going to be it, right? That's not the case. Obviously, I think we're definitely in a world where people understand that that's not the case anymore, where we're not in that 90s era where the U.S. is just the undisputed global power, right? You know, there's so many other factors out there that have global influence. Obviously, we talked about China already. You know, Russia still has the largest nuclear stockpile in the world. Like all of these things are global variables of power around the world that have diminished U.S. status in many ways. And so the key thing that we need to take out of this is, in some ways, it's embodied in the tweet that President Trump sent out. I think it was this morning or late yesterday, about how like he was talking about how Putin, Xi, and Kim Jong-un were conspiring against the United States in China, which is like it's like he's playing the game, right? Like there's a way to engage and there's a way to put pressure on people in a way that preserves all the options that we need on the table to, at any time, whatever option that the president may want to use against any other nation, like he has the ability to use sweet talk, but and offer sweet deals, or he can also put on tremendous pressure at any time in whatever fashion that he wants. We've lost that strategic foresight and ability to be like nimble and operate in this sort of gray zone the same way that the Russians never lost that capability, the Chinese never lost that capability, right? They've been trying to undermine U.S. influence ever since the dawn of time. And so for us, like recognizing that there is like a lot of gray space that we need to operate in, and having that strategic flexibility to like not fall into each of these traps of like, oh my God, Modi is in China, therefore it must mean that like he's now on their side and he's no longer on our side. Like the world isn't quite black and white in that way. We need to see the world for being the gray zone that it is.
Samir?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Joe said. I mean, I don't think it is no need to overreact to cheap talk. And I think there was a lot of cheap talk at the SCO. And I think, I'm kind of a homer on this, but I'd say, we should find a way back to the U.S.-India relationship where we were even a few months ago. I mean, the Trump administration set a really high bar in the beginning of the administration.
I mean, you and I were in India when the vice president delivered that incredible speech.
Exactly. So I think we should try to get back there. I think Congress can help. I mean, one of the things I think we've been lacking is some multiplicity of communication channels. And so Congress can confirm the new nominee for ambassador to India. Right. They can confirm the new nominee for assistant secretary. We can have sort of more diplomatic channels so we don't have like hurt feelings every time there's sort of misunderstanding. And then I'd like to see, the bureaucracy move a lot faster on things. I mean, when India says it wants to buy Javelin missiles and it's ready to do so, I don't want that to get stalled in a process when we need the political wins now. So I want sort of quicker movements for quick wins and a virtuous cycle so we can get back to this relationship.
Just to double down, Samir, I worked India issues in 2011 and 12, and Javelin issues were even back then. The issues.
Still trying to get them done.
Some things never change. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I just want to do a quick 10-minute conversation with all of you because I think you guys are really so knowledgeable of these issues, and there's been a lot of talk about what happened in Beijing. So I thought, we do one take from the SCSP point of view. So thank you for coming. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'll see you again soon, guys.